How's it going, my bakers? I hope you're having a fantastic day. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're not making bread, we're making pastry. So let's go to the kitchen and check it out. Right, back to some bakes from around the world. These Haitian beef patties are certainly unique and tasty. Although the most important lesson in this video will be about making rough puff pastry. Just look at that flaky, buttery goodness. It is super easy to make too, and you can master it on your first try, trust me. It'll make a great addition to your baking skill set. It's just such a versatile dough. So let's get right to it and see what we need to make it. Right, for the dough, we'll need some white bread flour, some cold butter cut into cubes, salt, and some cold water. And I can't stress this enough, your ingredients must be cold. Now when baking any kind of pastry, you want to glaze it, and we'll just use an egg for it. For the filling, I got some ground beef, onions, garlic, bell peppers, and some salt and pepper. But to make these into Haitian patties, we need some Haitian seasoning. I have some parsley, oregano, basil, bell peppers, onions, garlic, chili, some cloves, some apple cider vinegar, oil, salt and pepper. I've seen some recipes using fresh thyme, but I couldn't find any. But this recipe works well without it anyway. As for the equipment, we'll need a tray with some non-stick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a brush, and a rolling pin. We'll start by making our dough, because that's the most important thing here. In your bowl, combine the flour and the salt, and give it a good mix. Once you mix it up, add the butter. And this is perhaps the most crucial part of making this dough. The butter should be cut into about 2.5 centimeter or 1 inch cubes. It needs to be quite chunky, because we don't want it to break down too much. We're not making biscuits here. So coat all the cubes of butter with flour, and then press each cube, maybe once or twice between your fingers. No more than that. You want it to be quite big. If you break it down too much, your pastry will not be flaky. It'll be more bread-like. This is what it should look like once you're finished. As you can see, the butter is still nice and chunky. Now we can continue by adding the cold water. And of course, if you're using warm ingredients or even room temperature ingredients, this will not work, because the butter will start melting and all those chunks will disappear. Mix the dough gently until you don't see any more dry flour. Don't work it too much. You want this to be nice and loose. Once all the flour has been hydrated, tip the dough out on the table and then press it together. And we're not kneading it here, we're just pressing it together until it's one cohesive piece. Right now this can be wrapped up and placed in the fridge to cool down for 1 hour. The dough is quite loose, but still needs to relax before it can be rolled out and folded. And that is why we must chill it. Okay, unwrap your dough and dust it generously with flour, and dust the table too. Then grab your rolling pin and roll it to about 3 times its length. Try to do it nice and evenly, but don't worry if it starts breaking up a little bit, that's totally normal. You can see the streaks of butter in the dough. That is definitely a good sign. Once you have rolled it out to about 3 times its length, even out the edges. And then roll it a couple more times to even out the thickness of it. Okay, now we can perform the first fold. We're going to create 3 layers. So take 1/3 of the dough and fold it over. Now straighten it out as much as you can. Of course, don't worry if it's not perfect. This is, after all, rough puff pastry. Now fold over the loose end. That's how simple the first fold is. And now give the dough and the table a good dusting of flour once again. We need to roll the dough out one more time to about 3 times its length. And roll it in the direction of the 2 open ends. Do it gradually, don't press too hard. It can be quite fragile, and you don't want to break it with your rolling pin. Once you rolled it out, repeat the same fold as earlier. Fold over 1/3, even it out, then fold over the loose end. So we have gone from 3 layers to 9, but it's not ready yet. We must place this in the fridge to cool down for another hour, because it needs one more fold to make it extra flaky. So let's leave it to chill, then bring it out again, unwrap it, dust it with some flour, and now roll it out. Again, in the direction of the 2 open ends. To get it extra even, you can press it out with your rolling pin like this before you start rolling it. This will ensure that you roll it out nice and straight. This fold will be performed exactly the same as the previous 2. After this, our dough will have 27 layers. I have seen some recipes which suggest folding it once again, or a couple more times. And you can definitely do that. In fact, there's countless recipes for rough puff pastry. But this one has worked for me really well. And I like that it's relatively simple. Chill it down for 1 more hour and it's ready for use. That's how you make rough puff pastry. And if that's the recipe you were looking for, you can stop watching this video right now. If you're making Haitian patties, get some oil in your pan, get it nice and hot, add the beef, the onions, the garlic, the salt and pepper, and the bell peppers. Then cook the mix on high heat, stirring occasionally for around 7 minutes. It doesn't take long at all. Now we can transfer this to a bowl and leave it on the side. By the way, you could use any other mince for this. But this filling is nothing without the Haitian seasoning. And it is the easiest thing in the world, that is, if you have a food processor. If you don't, you could use a pestle and mortar for this. It would take a bit longer, but there's nothing wrong with that. But regardless of what you use, combine all the ingredients and mix them until smooth. This recipe makes more seasoning than needed. I ended up using about 2/3 of it, and I used the rest as a dip. It would also make great salad dressing. This seasoning kind of reminds me of Argentinian chimichurri. They're both made with various herbs, they both contain a bit of chili, and they both have vinegar in them. Haiti and Argentina are quite far away from each other, but there might be some influence, who knows. Okay, so to finalize the filling, mix the seasoning with the beef. That green color makes it look a little bit funky, but trust me, this is delicious. Now we can leave this on the side and start preheating our oven. We'll go for 200 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so the pastry should be nicely chilled and relaxed by now. And of course you've guessed it, we'll be dusting it with some flour and rolling it out again. But of course this time there is no folding. You'll get 8 patties out of this dough. I did not measure it when I rolled it, I just rolled it out to a nice big rectangle. And it doesn't really matter if it's slightly thicker or thinner. The most important part is that you divide it into equal pieces. A pizza cutter works really well here. First trim the edges, and then divide it into 8. If you don't have a pizza cutter, you can use a knife. But try not to ruin your table. Instead of cutting the dough in a sawing motion, just press the knife down. Or even better still, place it on the chopping board. After all, this dough is not sticky at all. It's quite easy to handle and you can move it around. Okay, after dividing, brush the edges of the dough with the egg. The egg will act as glue, sticking the two parts of pastry together. After brushing, lay on the filling. Distribute it evenly between all the pieces of dough. When it comes to closing them up, be nice and gentle. Don't rush it, take your time. You don't want any filling trapped between the dough. Fold it over like this, by holding the filling down with your thumbs. Once you have folded it down, press it together. Then pick the patty up and press the sides together as well. It's easier than it looks, because the dough is quite pliable. We'll use a fork to crimp the edges together. This will not only prevent them from opening up, but it will also make them look nice. And don't be shy here, press quite firmly. Of course you don't want to press right down to the table, but you do want to get close to that. Imagine all the fillings that could go inside these. Spiced beans, onions and potatoes, some curried chicken perhaps, or maybe something sweet like curd cheese and jam. This kind of dough is very versatile and it will go with many flavors. To get the most out of our egg, we'll brush the patties once, leave them to dry for 5 minutes and then brush them again. This will make the glaze extra golden brown and thick. And it's well worth the 5 minutes of waiting. Okay, let's get these bad boys in the oven. They'll take around 25 minutes. And just look at them puffing up and bubbling with all that butter. Once they are golden brown all over, they're ready. If your oven's like mine and only has the heating element on the top, check their bottoms. You may want to flip them around for the last few minutes of baking. Although I didn't have to do it this time. But it's better to be safe than sorry, right? You don't want a soggy pastry bottom on your patty. But there you have it. How to make rough puff pastry and how to make Haitian style patties. They are both great things in their own right. Pastry is super versatile. And knowing how to make it is a great skill to have. And the Haitian patty is unique and tasty, and something different. And you bet there will be more recipes using this pastry in the future. So what do you think of this recipe? Have you ever made rough puff pastry before? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.